everybody. I want to welcome you into the 41st episode of the Menorah Podcast. And today is Thursday, November the 14th. And my name is Brady Henderson. I serve as a senior pastor of the First Baptist Church of Gaston. And you are listening to the Menorah Podcast. I want to let you know that the Menorah Podcast, the purpose is to share the light, speak the light, and send the light of Jesus Christ all across the airwaves of the internet. And so today we have a guest on our podcast, Alan, that we have had before. But today we're going to talk a little bit about the South Carolina Baptist Convention. We had that on Monday night and Tuesday, and we also had myself and four of our deacons went to the pastors' conference on Monday morning and Monday afternoon. So, Alan, we are recording this on Wednesday morning, and I think I can speak for myself and maybe Mike as well. I'm a little tired from the last 2 days and all the meetings that we've been in.
Yeah, I can imagine. I know how sometimes you get that way from engaging. You know, you don't have to be digging ditches or things like that. It's a different tired.
Oh, yeah.
But, yeah, I understand that fully.
So, Mike, we experienced a convention. This was my fourth convention that I have been to as a pastor representing our church, but this was your first. And so I kind of wanted to have you on this morning. A big question that I get when we come back every year, not just for the state. This is the state convention. This isn't the national. National will be in Dallas this upcoming year in June, and that's a whole nother ball game. As smoothly as our convention goes, Mike, the national convention is usually a lot crazier in different ways. But, Mike, I just want to get you, and I'll ask you some specific questions, but, Mike, I just kind of want to get your initial, okay, what did you think?
Like you said, this was my first convention that I've attended. Never having been to one, you kind of go in and not knowing what to expect. It was a half a day long event on Monday and pretty much a day long event yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know you prepared me for a couple of things, but once you get there and you see the layout, the itinerary, and you're going to be like, wow, this is a action-packed 2 days.
Yep. Yeah, there's a good combination of business, but also, I think, reporting, celebration. We hear from our universities. Of course, our cooperative program dollars go to all of this, and we proved to be a budget this year for $26.5 million, which has been our budget for several years now. And, of course, a large part of that goes to international missions as well as North American missions, but also our state colleges, North Greenville, Anderson, Charleston Southern. Mike, I wanted to ask you, I know you knew what the cooperative program was. That's something you and I have talked about a lot. But how interesting was it to see the cooperative program dollars that we give and other churches to see that at work?
Well, when I got home last night, I pulled out our budget sheet, which is not $26.5 billion. But I looked at that line item, state cooperative program. Having been to the convention, I have a finer appreciation now for the dollars that I see on our budget sheet and what the cooperative program does. As you mentioned, the universities. I just, learned so much, Camp McCall, Camp Levita, that's something our children can take place in, and yet we help fund that. And as you mentioned, the universities, the other thing, was the disaster relief. We just experienced the hurricane and got to see some aspects of that as well.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, another question. What did you think about all the business? We've got tons of committees, tons of different things, and what did you think about all that?
Well, like you said, and as I mentioned earlier, I looked at the agenda when we got there, and it was like, wow, this is going to be busy. But I think they did a great job with breaking it up, having messages from pastors, 20-minute message in between all the business, time of worship, different praise teams that were on the stage and leading us through 5 minutes of worship. And so it kind of broke up the business part of it. I don't think I was beat down by the business side of it, but I think it was very informative, to be able to hear from each one of these groups that the cooperative program supports. Each one of these groups got up and gave their report of how the dollars is affecting them for what they want to do in the future looks like.
Yeah, exactly. One thing that was really neat was what Mike mentioned, the worship. The worship choir on Monday night, First Baptist Columbia, that's where the convention was this year, their choir sang. But on Tuesday, we had the combination choirs from students from Anderson, Charleston Southern, and North Greenville. And that was really, really cool. Just kind of want to stick on the worship for a second. Very moving. Very moving
Yes.
worship. The preaching was very evangelistic, which I appreciated. I thought it was good. But man, that worship, that was really awesome. And I'm still running on the fumes of that this morning, in worship and praise to our Lord. And so, Alan, hearing a little bit of Mike's perspective, I know I've told you about the convention before, but hearing Mike's perspective, any initial thoughts or questions you have?
I would ask Mike, having gone for the first time, is that something you'd recommend other folks do?
Yes, especially, when you look at the budget and you're like, we give this amount of money, and what's my dollars doing, and I kind of went into the convention with that attitude, but I walked out a different person now, hearing from everyone and where this money goes.
Yeah, I agree with that. You plan on going next year? It's in Taylor's next year.
I'm looking forward to it if it fits my schedule, yes.
I hear you. Switch gears a little bit. I know you've been to the Pastors Conference before. You've been with me to that. We went last year, and then, of course, this year. An entire 8 hours of straight preaching. I mean, there's worship too, but it's, in my opinion, some of the best preachers in the state. Not just the state, but the area. I know Richard Blackaby was there this year. And so you got a full day of hearing some great preaching. Just want to hear your thoughts on the Pastors Conference and how you felt about that.
I thought it was awesome. I mean, I went to the one last year, and I enjoyed it. So which was an incentive for me to come back this year to the Pastors Conference. Yeah, like you said, a great group of speakers. I think this year's theme was On Fire, and that was to light the fire on the pastors in this room, because that's primarily what it was. I mean, there were deacons there, but it was primarily gauged towards the pastors. Not saying that deacons and other people could not benefit from it, because certainly all of the preaching was beneficial for everyone.
Want to ask you, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but you get used to my preaching style and you hear me preach all the time. How good is it to sit in a room where you get to hear 5 different guys? They all have different styles. None of them are like me. None of them are like each other. We're all different. How beneficial is that, instead of hearing the same old Brady every week, to be able to be in a room and hear 5 different guys with 5 different styles, 5 different backgrounds?
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting, like I said, I'm used to you and your style and everything, but yeah, there were different guys that they had a different way of delivering their message.
I mean, you served on a pastor search committee, and obviously you've heard a ton of pastors since you were on that, online sermons and things like that. So you have a very diverse viewpoint on different styles and different things. So, and I think that goes to show that different styles are not an issue, as long as, we've said before, methodology may change as long as the message does not. So I think that's important. One thing that I thought about the Pastors Conference this year that was a little bit different, I loved that they went through a section of Scripture. They went through 1 Kings 18 all the way through 1 Kings 19. Last few years it's been, no offense to any of the past Pastors Conference presidents, but it's been very hodgepodge. It's been very, whatever God lays on your heart. And I'm good with that too. But this year was cool because the theme was all, it was in an expository way, and I like that. I can follow that a little bit easier, So I really thought that was really interesting.
As you mentioned, your style, I'm used to that, but these pastors here, one thing that I really enjoyed was they said, don't get up there and try to put on a different tap dance or show for the congregation, but preach the gospel. And I think that's what we're lacking in today's churches. Pastors try to put on a different facade or something, but just preach the gospel.
Yeah,
and that's what moves, and that's what those messages were about, preaching the gospel. That's what we need to hear.
Yep. And coming from the text, straight from the text. I think that was the main thing, was don't dance and get in bed with the culture.
Yeah.
Don't do that in your sermons and in your preaching. So it was also really good to have several of our younger deacons. And when I say younger, I mean, recently brought on. Keith Ray was brought on 2 years ago now, Stafford this year, and then Troy this year. So it was cool to watch them experience that.
Yes.
Obviously, Mike, I mean, you've experienced it before, but to see kind of firsthand, to watch them go through that and to see that was really cool as a pastor, to kind of watch the gears move in their head as they're in there. Mm-hmm. That was pretty neat. So, Alan, you got any thoughts or questions for Mike?
Kind of want to go back to something he said earlier about, or something you said about having heard so many pastors, so many different messages, both online and in person now. How does online versus hearing this in person, what's your thoughts on that?
Online is great, but I feel that you have to be there, get the full experience. To me, in person, there's no substitute for it. Back during COVID, we went online and streaming, those kind of things, but just being there in person is awesome.
I'll be honest, I'm going to make an odd point here that the Lord just laid on my heart. I think that God used COVID to bring me here. What I mean by that is if COVID had not happened, the committee would have come in person. And I don't think it was so easy during COVID to turn on YouTube and close your eyes and listen to the message. It's so easy to do that. When they looked at my resume, it might, correct me if I'm wrong, probably the least attractive resume y'all had, right?
Yes.
And so, least attractive resume, and so it would be hard, at that time I was in the upstate, so it would be hard for the committee to say, man, this is the least attractive resume we've got, but we're going to give him a chance, and we're going to drive 2.5 hours away, and we're going to spend a day listening to this guy, even though his resume is not attractive at all. And you correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think that would have happened, but I think it was easier for them to say, look, we'll give him a fair shot, and we'll listen to his online message. We can listen instead of getting in a car and driving. So I think God actually used that to bring me here, because I don't know if that would have happened if online wasn't being utilized the way it was.
Yes, I have to agree with you. And my first message of hearing you, I think it was recorded in your dorm room.
Yeah.
And that was...
Yeah, I had COVID, yeah.
Yeah. So, I thought that was an awesome way of God bringing us together.
Yeah. Yeah, I had COVID, and my pastor had COVID, but he had it worse than me, and I was like, well, we got to have a message Sunday, so somebody's got to do something. so anyway, yeah, that's kind of how that happened. But, I mean, I truly believe that I would be the pastor here if it wasn't for COVID, and I mean that in the sincerest thing of online gave me an opportunity, because even if they would have come, they would have been like, oh, my gosh, this kid's 21, I just don't know about this. But they took my content and my delivery. I know Olivia said she would close her eyes, listen at work, and she was able to, hear. So I think that really helped me a lot.
And very good perspective.
Yeah, it's a humble gratitude thing for me, because it's kind of like God. I know COVID was bad, and we all don't like COVID. We never want COVID to come back, but there are some good things that came out of it. I just don't know how I would have been able to seep through the cracks. Of course, God would have had a way, but I think God used COVID for me to seep through the cracks. I mean, you get 120 resumes or whatever, and I'm number 120, it's only an act of God that it worked out.
So oftentimes we look at our circumstances and we think about how horrible they are and how much they've disrupted our lifestyle, and then years later you see God's hand in all of it, how these circumstances directed His will in your life and in your actions. And so I would caution people that are going through times that seem insurmountable to give yourself time to get on the other side of that and look back and see how God worked in your life.
Yep, I agree. All right, Mike, we're going to go ahead and get you out of here today. Thank you so much. Got anything, closing thoughts?
It was a joy to be here. It was a joy to go to the convention. Just a final thought was, in the last 2 days, I would have had to drive all over the state to hear the different pastors speak, and I got to hear it all in one place past 2 days, and it was awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Well, it was good. Chuck Sprouse will be our president next year. Y'all pray for me. I'm serving on committees this year, and I believe I'm the first pastor to serve our church at the state level in a really long time. I don't know how long, but look forward to serving. All right, guys, thank you for tuning in. The 41st episode of the Menorah Podcast. Don't forget, the purpose of this podcast is to share the light, speak the light, and send the light of Jesus Christ all across the airways of the internet. We will see you next Thursday for episode 42.